Salutations and welcome to Glitch Bottle, where we uncork the uncommon in magic, mysticism, and the generally misunderstood. The following you're about to hear is a sentence that you probably never even thought would be verbalized, but it's true, and here it is. Modern quantum theories are starting to agree with ceremonial magic. Now let me just repeat that in case the coffee hasn't quite kicked in yet. Quantum physicists and cognitive scientists today are starting to validate the thousands of years old occult philosophies and techniques that form the bedrock of Western Solomonic, or Western Shamanistic, if you will, techniques. Now, I am certainly not a quantum theorist, but after this video, I encourage you to please read and enjoy all of the articles that I reference below, posted in the description, and decide for yourself. But here is the gist, in as far as a brief video can at least capture. Modern science is starting to recognize that subjective reality is not just dreams, fantasy, and ethereal wisps of erroneous human thought just kind of banging around somewhere. Instead, science is beginning to recognize that your subjective direct experience, your thoughts, your dreams, your direct engagement with your own consciousness, all of those things added up are actually what literally validates or makes reality, well, real. And now, Western ceremonial magic, as many Solomonic practitioners will know, has been saying this for literally thousands of years. But before we get into that, why don't we just take a quick look at what the scientists are now saying? And it's some pretty impressive stuff. These articles in the year 2016 have just come out in the last few months. So ever since we were kids, we've totally heard about the same usual old school Newtonian and accepted scientific belief structure that says that there is always in science an objective physical reality. In other words, there is something out there that can never be altered, changed, or determined by what science calls our subjective reality. So, for example, say there's a tree somewhere blowing in the wind. Science has told us for hundreds of years that no matter how many cool dreams we have about the tree, or how much fantasy or poetry or subjective feelings or emotional charging we may have about the tree, the two realities, subjective and objective, never interact. And the objective tree will always be the objective tree, and we should just get it out of our head, get moving on with our lives, and forget about it, right? Well, wrong. In an article from Quanta magazine from April of 2016, we meet cognitive scientist Donald Hoffman, who argues that what we actually perceive as reality all around us is in fact an illusion. The article starts by saying, quote, "Quantum systems don't seem to be definite objects localized in space until we come along to observe them, whether we are conscious humans or inanimate measuring devices. Experiment after experiment has shown, defying common sense, that if we assume that the particles that make up ordinary objects have an objective, observer-independent existence, we get the wrong answers. Quantum physics is clear that there are no public objects just sitting out there in some pre-existing space. As the physicist John Wheeler put it, useful as it is under ordinary circumstances to say that the world exists out there independent of us, that view can no longer be upheld." And that's just huge. So let me ask you a question. Isn't that literally the definition of the occult? That the reality we see every day is basically only a sliver, a flimsy veil, if you will, behind which dwells the multidimensional celestial, terrestrial, and infernal forces, the powers, the consciousnesses, just waiting to be engaged with by magicians. Magicians in ritualistic encounters, or in terms of rhythmic drumming or dancing, or in the Solomonic tradition in terms of exercising and executing the prescriptions and the grimoires. This subjectively imbued reality is challenging the old school Newtonian idea that things are objective. Here's Hoffman again saying, quote, "The idea that what we're doing is measuring publicly accessible objects, the idea that objectivity results from the fact that you and I can measure the same object in the exact same situation and get the same results, it's very clear from quantum mechanics that idea has got to go." Now, a personal subjective connection that is 100% real, that's what these quantum physicists and scientists are talking about. And I'm sure you can think of countless examples, but this happens in magic all the time. I immediately thought, after reading that quote, of the sacred book of Abramelin the Mage, with the goal of bonding with your holy guardian angel, or HGA. So if reality isn't objective, then what is it? Well, scientists are saying that physics gets very personal for humans, and that our own felt presence of direct experience, as Terence McKenna would say, is actually the determining factor that makes reality, well, real. So what does magic actually say about the importance of subjective experience? Well, well-known scholars of magic and authors Stephen Skinner and David Rankine weigh in on this in their rendering of the Janua Magica Reserata, a 17th century magical manuscript central to angelic magicians of the time, which says, quote, "Our minds doth affect diverse things by faith. That is a firm adhesion, a fixed intention, and determination and application of the worker or receiver. To him they cooperate in anything, and gives power to the work we intend to do. We must therefore in all things affect vehemently, imagine, hope, and believe strongly, for that is the greatest help, and conducteth wholly to the assistance of the operator." So in other words, in modern terms, how your consciousness approaches and vibrates with the objective reality of your environment actually makes all the difference. Here's one of the grand old masters, Agrippa, in Book 3, where he says, quote, "The efficacy of consecrations is perfected by two things, especially vis-a-vis the virtue of the person himself consecrating and the virtue of the prayer itself. In the person himself is required holiness of life and a power to consecrate. The former nature and desert perform." So this subjectivity also places the mage's emotions, mental vibrations, and perceptions at the heart of magic itself, which the science is saying truly, that's the study of reality. Here's another example. Aaron Leitch, an author, scholar, and practitioner of Renaissance-era Solomonic magic, touches on this concept in his book, Secrets of the Magical Grimoires, saying of the mage devoting him or herself to their celestial powers, quote, "It is not simply the existence of the love, but the yearning itself that generates such power." Leitch also says that, quote, "The art of the priest is to harness this power within himself and the world around him. By directing his devotion towards a discorporate entity, the emotion can be driven to a fevered pitch that must find release in a philosophical sense. It becomes a gateway to the higher mental circuits with their more all-encompassing interpretations of reality." So a core tenet of Western Solomonic and global shamanistic practices is the importance of a subjective, direct experience. But wait, the science continues to support this point. And it was just amazing going through these articles and just experiencing the connections and the different perceptions and practices that mages have had for hundreds of years in the Solomonic tradition. For instance, speaking of a scientist, meet quantum physicist Christopher Fuchs, who speaks in an article on Quantum Magazine titled "A Private View of Quantum Reality," and his own interpretation of quantum wave functions, so to speak, to describe reality, he's calling cubism, literally invokes earlier cultures and people's approach of reality to support how reality really works. So, in other words, this quantum physicist is saying that reality, everything right now, your computer screen, what you see, what you think, what you feel, all the objects you see, it's not objective at all. And Fox says, quote, "It's said that in earlier civilizations, people didn't quite know how to distinguish between objective and subjective. But once the idea of separating the two gained a toehold, we were told that we have to do this and that science is about the objective. Now that it's done," he says, "it's hard to turn back. I think the biggest fear people have of cubism is precisely this, that it's anthropocentric. The feeling is we got over that with Copernicus, and this has to be a step backwards. But I think if we really want a universe that's rife with possibility, with no ultimate limits on it, this is exactly where you've got to go." So subjective reality is the multidimensional web woven beautifully by Solomonic practitioners of magic. Whether that's the raising of the passions to a frenzy, as Agrippa would call it and as described by Aaron Leitch, or using strong emotions to charge a mercurial talismanic operation, as author Stephen Skinner did in the past, or entering a state of ecstasy, of near trance and praising the powers that be, as Leitch describes with Devotional Magic. It's about dropping those pebbles of ritual and conversation with entities into the still pool of our consciousness, and those ripples that get sent out generate the magic. This is beautifully put by author, practicing occultist, and grimoire traditionalist Frater Ashen Chassan, who, in his book Gateways Through Stone and Circle, discusses how, by blending objective and subjective reality into a unified whole, magic inevitably results, saying, quote, "The true will of the magician is the harmonious expression of complete being in all bodies. This is perhaps best explained by the multitude of sacred trinities, the three of creation made one, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, thought, word, deed, mind, body, soul. When we are able to cancel the division between these three by pointed action, we get magic, that is, the whole of our comprehended universe." It is this blending of objective and subjective states that literally makes the magic happen. For example, yes, magic does have what one might call objective things, for sure, that aren't totally bound by subjectivity. The circle, the tools, the layman, the phylactery, the timing of the operations are very so-called objective things that need to be in place in order to help make the operation work. These are things that are done as part of the grimoires. But the other side of this unified coin is subjectivity, the emotional states, and expanding your consciousness to vibrate as only you know how to do for a ritual. In other words, is there really a separation between objective and subjective? Like, for real? Well, here's quantum theorist Christopher Fuchs again, saying, quote, "Our theory would say, it's not that the world is built up from stuff on the outside, as the Greeks would have had it, nor is it built up from stuff on the inside, as the idealists would have it. Rather, the stuff of the world is in the character of what each of us encounters every living moment, stuff that is neither inside nor outside, but prior to the very notion of a cut between the two at all." Something to think about. Thanks for watching Glitch Bottle, and may the spirits be forever swirling at your side.